Murat of The Athletic with us here on the Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily Show. Today, after the morning skate, it was Brendan Dillon and Mark Scheifele that were there. And, there's a number of questions that were asked. It was a pretty loose environment around the rink this morning. But you did ask a pretty pointed question, something that we're going to get to in a minute on, the Jets' ability to defend and about, the amount of slot shots that the Winnipeg Jets have given up. Tell us about the question and what you heard from the players.
Yeah, the question comes from just, an honest place of truth. If you look at the stats, if you watch the team play, whichever metric that you want to use, whether you want to listen to the coaches of opposing teams like Bruce Cassidy, whether you want to talk about the Craig Button rant on TSN, whether you use your eyes, the experts, or the stats, Winnipeg gives up too much from the middle of the ice in front of Connor Hellebuck and in front of Eric Comrie. There's too much quality there. And guys like me, we can look at the stat sheet and we can see that. We can look at the heat maps. We can see that. We can use our eyes and put that together. But only an NHL player, only an NHL coach is going to give you the goods in terms of the X's and O's or the why is this happening. Other than that, it's really just theories from us. And, I've picked on Mark Scheifele's defense, quite a lot over the course of the season. I really think that there are a lot of 50-50 plays or even less than 50-50 plays where he chooses the offense route and leaves the defense to somebody else on his team. Brendan Dillon as well, a top four defenseman, and he's played up and down as well. And these are two bright guys. If I'm going to talk about this and write about it, I better ask the question as well and see what we can learn from folks like that. It wasn't the deepest dive of an answer from Brendan Dillon on the topic. I think, both of the guys kind of paused and who's going to take this one and what are we going to say? But Dillon suggested that there have been some defensive adjustments and systemic changes over the course of the year that may, involve a need for heightened communication and things like that. And I think that the presser ended at that. Mine was the last question, and it was announced as such as I was asking it. So that's kind of where it stands. I think there's room for more of a deep dive. I think there's room for more space. But I got to put it to the guys if I'm going to write about it. And so they had the opportunity to speak to it.
Well, it was a great question, and it was something that I know we've talked a lot about. And listen, I'm sure the players and the team have talked about too. Well, I guarantee the coaches have talked about it in the coaching room. Whether how much they've been imparting on their team has worked remains to be seen. But going into this offseason, the big questions about defense, so much of it comes on coaching. And listen, we've talked a lot about Dave Lowry's situation, which I think was a very difficult one to come in. The way Paul Maurice left, the fact that they just played a couple games and had a long break before coming back after basically a Christmas holiday and the COVID shutdown and all that. But it's hard to ignore the fact that there hasn't really been significant improvement anywhere except for maybe the penalty kill since he took over for Paul Maurice, which certainly does begat the question or discussion about what makes the most sense for the Winnipeg Jets coaching wise next year. I won't ask you to say whether, to be the judge, jury, and executioner of Dave Lowry, but let's say that they decide as an organization to move on and bring someone new in. When you think about that job and the task at hand for this group, regardless of, changes of that Kevin Cheveldayoff makes, assuming that most of this team is back next year, what would you be looking for in a coach? What type of a coach do you would make the most sense to get the most out of the Winnipeg Jets in your mind, Murat?
For me, it's really about tying the minutes that players get to their overall impact and not just how much they score or what contract they have or how long they've been around, but both sides of the ice, neutral zone included, all three zones. What happens when these guys are on the ice? What's the commitment level like? What's the effort and energy level like? How long are the shifts? How good are the fundamentals? And then with the ice time that they get, how much do they produce relative to what they give up? And Winnipeg has kind of been haunted by the fact that some of the guys that produce the most are the ones who give up the most as well. And not just within the realm of reasonable for they play against the best competition, which is often true. It's been a little bit disproportionate. And if you want Winnipeg to win, if you want Winnipeg to be a playoff team, so 16 out of 32 make the playoffs. If you're a playoff team, presumably you're above average. If you're winning rounds, presumably you're one of the better teams. To do that, you need your best line to outscore other best lines. on the whole, they have to create more than they give up. And I think that's what's really plagued the Winnipeg Jets, is this level of commitment to defense from, yes, I harp on this so often, and he's such a good player in so many different ways. I loved his insight that he brought to the press conference today, his reflections on Humboldt. But Mark Scheifele is not a strong defensive player right now. He had been at times early on in his career. And if Winnipeg's number one centerman continues to get number one centerman minutes, players within that team are going to have issue with it. There's no way around that. I mean, it's so substantial that it is impossible not to see. And I think that either Mark Scheifele returns to that all-around excellence or close to it, because he creates so much, he can get away with being average defensively. That would be completely fine. Either he gets back to that because he and the coach have a sit down and whatever else needs to happen, or those minutes get cut. And I know that we're not talking about roster changes right now, but those minutes then get cut, and Pierre-Luc Dubois is getting major minutes. And there's other line combinations as well. So I really think that the question about coaching is accountability, pardon me, I can't even say the word. And it's about tying minutes to performance in every facet of the game.
Well, I mean, accountability has been the buzzword that we've talked about during the Paul Maurice era and afterwards. And I mean, I think you sort of nailed it. And yeah, it does start with 55, because I mean, I've thought the exact same thing. When you're leaning on so many players to do particular things, and the guys that you count on the most are seemingly at times not engaged or not doing what everyone else is, it hurts the team. And, and I think it hurts the dressing room as well. I mean, as far as the real commitment to the team, when you don't see the most important players on the team pulling their weight in that respect.
Can I jump in on that? Can I just, before I let that one go? I mean, you've seen me write really critically on this topic, and you saw the mailbag that you mentioned earlier today. I mean, I say it again, and it's in there. Every time I write something like that, and I try to back it up with as much, whether it's data or video, depending on the piece, every time I write that, I worry, is somebody within the Jets going to send me an angry email? That never happens. Is somebody, are the fans going to rail against it? What's the feedback going to be like? And you know what has happened more often than not is that people with NHL jobs, with front office jobs, with people, whether it's in Winnipeg or outside of Winnipeg more commonly, I hear from them that, you know what, somebody needed to say that. And that's shocking to me, the fact that I get messages like that. That's why in the mailbag today, I was as pointed as I was, because these conversations don't get started by me. They get started by people who know more than me. So that's why I write what I write, and I'm so concerned like I am.
No, listen, I mean, I'm the exact same way. And I mean, I'm sitting here talking for 2+ hours a day, the majority of it during the hockey season, on the Jets. And I mean, I think everyone knows that all of this comes from a place of passion for the club, and at least me personally, I mean, wanting the club to do well, wanting to see the best out of this club that's possible. And it's the exact same thing. I've had a ton of conversations with people. And I mean, I was bringing this up starting in November when things were starting on as to what's the future of Mark Scheifele, what's going on. And I'll tell you what, there has been no negative brushback from it all. And in fact, depending on, who I was talking to at the time, it was sort of like, exactly what you just said. Some of this stuff needs to be said. And as I said, I mean, like, the thing that is so confounding and so frustrating is that we've seen so much better at times before from said player Mark Scheifele, and we know that the talent is there. And the bottom line is he is just so damn important to this team that, if you get the best out of Mark Scheifele, this team's going to be really good. And if what's happened this season way too often happens, not only does it drag down the team in a particular game, but I really do think it has an effect on the rest of the rank and file wearing those jerseys. So, hey, listen, the conversation isn't going away anytime soon. Be interesting to see. I mean, I kind of talk about what I'm looking for in the final 12 games of this year. And, for some younger players, it'll be able to show that they belong and they're able to do more, and hopefully showing some improvement. But for many of the players that are well-established veterans, I mean, I think we're going to find out a lot about, how committed they are to their teammates, to the people that are writing their checks. And listen, I know there's probably a portion of the fan base that would love for these guys just to fall flat and lose every game and, get a better draft pick. But that's not what the culture of winning hockey teams do. And, it's going to be fascinating to see kind of how this team plays, what the coaching staff does, who plays, how they handle things, but also the response of the veteran players to the very unfortunate situation where you're essentially playing for next year, with the significant time of a period left in the season. Back to the mailbag for the minute. And I love the fact that I'm not surprised that you got a number of comments on this. And it sort of goes into the coaching discussion for next year, but it involves Nikolaj Ehlers. And Ehlers, we've talked about, for hours probably over the course of this past year about the special things that he does, what he brings to the team. I don't think anyone could possibly make the argument that the Winnipeg Jets have gotten the most out of Nikolaj Ehlers over the last few years. And a big part of that is where he's playing, how much he's playing, who he's playing with, all of that. Would you agree that, regardless of who is the coach next season, maybe the most important job when it comes to figuring out how the puzzle pieces work together is making a point of getting Nikolaj Ehlers comfortable on a line long-term that can play 1A, 1B minutes and increase the productivity of a guy that, when he's on the ice is a massive difference maker for Winnipeg.
100%. Well said. Just clearing my throat. The way that Winnipeg earns its reputation, I think, as a deep and dominant offensive group whose forwards are just set, is it has two lines that outscore the opposition like a first line would typically do. And Kyle Connor and Pierre-Luc Dubois are 2/3 of an awfully great start at one. Nikolaj Ehlers should be part of another. And certainly, Mark Scheifele has that ability as well, depending on all the stuff that we've just talked about. Blake Wheeler has been at times of his career one of the most dominant players in the NHL. But right now, if you're the Winnipeg Jets, again, it's Connor and Dubois, 2/3 of excellence right there. And then Nikolaj Ehlers is your other prime-aged, dominant, dynamic forward who can carry the flow of play and outscore his opposition. He's not great in his own zone. He's not going to be doing the 2-pad stack shot blocks and all that sort of stuff, but he's so good with the puck and transitioning it up ice that his impact is positive. So whereas the question perhaps of the last several years has been who plays with Scheifele and Wheeler? Is it Kyle Connor or is somebody else? Maybe it's about going to those prime-aged players like Nikolaj Ehlers and searching a line mate that works for him. Because of how important he is. And if you have a first line caliber set up in Connor and Dubois, you should be able to move somebody to that other line. And, Scheifele has shown some promise there. They're certainly both elite passers in their own way. Though we've talked about maybe the chemistry. Sometimes I think Scheifele likes a little bit more predictability in terms of a Kyle Connor than Nikolaj Ehlers can be tougher to predict, which is a challenge, I think. But he is such an important player, to your point, that I think that a coach would get a long ways out of the Winnipeg Jets, but just by tweaking the sliders a little bit in terms of increasing his ice time and opportunity and the amount of ideal minutes necessarily that Nikolaj Ehlers gets.
Ehlers is, and you've done a great job at, putting out let me just ask you for people that haven't read it. I mean, how does Nikolaj Ehlers compare both for offensive chances generated, time in zone, and then because let's face it, no one is going to be nominating Nikolaj Ehlers for the Selke anytime soon. But the bottom line is, I think you would agree that the results dictate that, when he's on the ice, the Jets are doing better and they're spending more time in the other team's end than they are in their own end. And that by definition, the best defense is a good offense, right? You're playing in the other team's zone.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't matter to me, like stylistically, how it gets done doesn't matter. If a player outscores the other team when they're on the ice, that's good. And Nikolaj Ehlers can do it one way, Pierre-Luc Dubois can do it another way. And what we've found over the years is that he is so good at transitioning the puck up ice, he has a positive impact on the team's defensive numbers because it spends less time in Winnipeg's end. And that's granting what you said. He's not going to win a Selke trophy anytime soon. The other side of the coin is his offense tends to get underrated. He tends to miss a few games every year due to injury or what have you. So he's not putting up these gaudy totals like Connor and Scheifele and others have, nor is he getting the minutes necessarily at 5-on-5 that these other guys have. But over the last several years, heading into this season, nobody scored more points per minute than Nikolaj Ehlers did on the Winnipeg Jets. And that includes Kyle Connor. This year, Connor's number one, Ehlers is number two, and then you move on down the list. But this is a player in Ehlers who's tends to be 4th, 5th, 6th, and even strength ice time by the end of the game. And for all the talk of, how much stamina does he have or what have you, I just say, look at the veteran shift length and tell me that that's a valid argument, sometimes. So his metrics show a player who can help and who could help in an increased role. And certainly we've only ever seen that in snippets at various times. Right now, obviously, with a tremendous opportunity, and it's on him to do quite a lot with it.
What did you think of Ehlers' time on the first power play unit in Connor's absence? And I guess subsequent to that, how do they get more of Nikolaj Ehlers on the power play next year?
Well, I mean, first unit time is how you do it. First and foremost, power plays are more dangerous the more weapons they have. Every single player who is a passing or shooting threat in the position that they're in is one more option that defenses have to prepare for. Dave Lowry said it today, more options, more movement, the better. And so he's a player that can step into a role like that and have success. He scored fairly early on. Like, let's not forget that he scored as a first power play member. But I think that the highlight reel that's going to get shown a lot is that giveaway he gets closed off by two guys along the wall, and then it leads to gangbusters the other way, and Winnipeg gives up a shorthanded goal. So, there is an element of, if you get that opportunity, you better protect the puck or send it somewhere safe in a moment like that. But on the aggregate, the guy is produced on the power play on the second unit at a tremendous rate over the years. And he has the shot and he has the passing ability that, I really can't see too many configurations of the Jets power play going forward without him in the number one, like on that number one unit. But I've been saying that for a few years. So we'll see. We'll see if it works out that way.
Murat of The Athletic. Make sure to check out the latest mailbag. A lot of great stuff. And as you mentioned, the mailbag is overflowing these days. Jet fans have plenty of questions for you. I imagine there'll be part 2 coming up relatively soon. And heck, you could probably do part 3, part 4, part 5 from the sounds of it with everything that's flooding the inbox.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, when a team that's supposed to make the playoffs and win at least a round or compete to win a round doesn't and isn't going to, yeah, the questions come in hot. Part 2 came out today, I should say, Huss. So we're out there. Part 2's there. It's the longer of the two. It goes into the box outs. It goes into defensive structure. It goes into coaching and all of that. Touches on Scheifele as well. Of course, there's a cameo from my mom, who I called to get her review of of a couple of key elements. And as soon as we hung up the phone, she said everything she had to say. She called me right back. I'm like, hi, Mom. Everything good? And she said, oh, yeah, by the way, I'd like to add. So that's all in there. So that's all in there as well. And I think the good thing, though, for guys like you, guys like me, and I'm sure that you'd report the same thing. Sometimes I get, oh, well, you just thrive on controversy. You want to pick things apart. Absolutely not. If the Winnipeg Jets go on a Stanley Cup run, do you know what that does to my subscription numbers? Like, you know what I mean? Like, this team doing well would be better for everybody in the business, ourselves included, I think. But the fact that it's not means that we get a lot of questions. And the fact that we get a lot of questions prove that these fans are still dialed in. Jets fans care. They want to see this ship get righted. They want to solve the problem that was whatever led to missing the playoffs this year, if that is what eventually happens, and get things going again. And that's been a good thing to see in the form of these mailbags.
Well, there's no doubt about it. And I know Mike had a piece in the Free Press, and there is a legitimate concern. It's a different world now than it was 10 years ago when the team come back. And from an organizational standpoint, they have some challenges that they've never dealt with before. But, as cantankerous and as angry as some people are as to where we are right now in this season, and the fact that these are the conversations we're having as opposed to, oh, who are they going to play in the first round and all that sort of excitement, you're exactly right. I mean, this hockey team is a huge part of people's lives around here, 12 months a year, not just during the hockey season itself. And I think for that reason, it's made, this sting more for people that were, incredibly excited, considering everything that we've been through for the last few years. And of course, an incredibly thrilling sweep of the Edmonton Oilers last year that no one was able to be at. I think a lot of people, myself included, thought that this was going to be an amazing season and, very exciting at this point. And, it's tough to take for a lot of folks, but I don't think anyone should mistake that for real apathy. It is disappointment. And you know what? There's next season, but there's a lot of work to get to that point. And the great thing is, as you just mentioned, everyone has an opinion, everyone has a thought on it, and that is because at the end of the day, they care about their hockey team.
Absolutely right. It's why I get to eat, right? It's why the station can do the stupid thing and you can take over and do what you do, right? It's like, that's what makes it work for us. So yeah, nice to get onto that topic and throw a little love out there too.
No doubt about it. It was great stuff. Both parts of the mailbag are up right now over at theathletic.com. And I know you'll have a lot more.